I think verse 12 sums it up well. But Haman hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered. We know where he was, what he was feeling.
He's pretty upset.
Yes.
But in the midst of his frustration, there comes this additional invitation to come to a second feast, right? And verse 14 says, "And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared." Now we're ready to complete this process of revealing to the king what's actually been going on, kind of behind the scenes, this plot by Haman to destroy all of Esther's people. So we jump into chapter 7.
Yes. And again, remarkably, the king says, "What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request?" So here is the opportunity. Then Esther the queen, in verse 3, answered and said, "If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish." And so she goes on to explain, this is what's happening.
And the king's saying,
Surprise.
So who in the world is making this plot against you and your people? Who is that?
Yes. Yes.
Well, you've got a banquet of 3. And Esther turns to him and says, well, the person who's done that is right here.
The adversary and enemy.
Is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So the king arises from the banquet in his wrath, and he went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to plead for his life. He knows this isn't going well for him with Esther, and he saw there was evil determined against him by the king. And when the king returns into the place of the banquet of wine, Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was, and so he is sent to the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai. And Mordecai's destruction now becomes the destruction for his own life. The irony is thick.
He that doeth iniquity doeth it unto himself. Is that a familiar Book of Mormon scripture?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're seeing play out right here with Haman. Is he had these big plans, but they didn't play out. Kind of like the devil had really big plans up in heaven.
Yes.
They didn't play out. And he has no power to play them out, even though he tries to convince us that he has that power.
I thought it was interesting that he had the gallows made. They were much taller than typically done. They were 75 feet high. And it ends up, because he wanted Mordecai to be an example to the Jews, and it ended up that Haman was hung on those very gallows.
Wonderful. So now, since the king, in their culture at that time, he can't undo or erase or veto an existing law on their books. The form of their constitution, whatever that looked like, prohibited that. So what the king does instead is he says, tell you what, we can just pass a new law to say that the Jews are totally welcome to defend themselves, and we can even facilitate that. So anybody who wants to try to destroy them, they will fight against them at their own peril. And so it's this new law that gets enacted, and Mordecai is honored and elevated to this high position of authority. And now that which was a sure destruction, this period of mourning for the people, now becomes this period of rejoicing, and we're delivered. There's hope. We aren't going to have to just be a victim of this law and be wiped out completely. And so they're able to fight back. So now you look at this come full circle. Look at verse 24. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur. That word in the Hebrew that means lots or dice. Well, if you put an im on the end, it becomes plural in English. So we would say purs, or in this case, dice. Mm-hmm. And that word, purim, actually shows up again in verse 26. Wherefore they call these days Purim after the name of Pur, which, by the way, was not intended. This was such a big deal to the Jews at that time that they didn't want this to be a a one-time event. Good. We dodged a bullet there. Let's move on and forget about it. No, they wanted this one, this deliverance, kind of similar, not terribly dissimilar to Passover, being this perpetual annual remembrance of how God delivered them.
That's right. That's right. A yearly reminder that God saved them.